In this lecture, we're going to be learning about how to draw texture. Now, there's two parts to texture. There's the contouring line part of texture, and then there's the highlights and shadows. We're going to leave the highlights and shadows for later in the course because that gets into lighting and that gets a lot more complicated. But for now, let's just talk about the contouring lines of texture. So for this project, the first thing we want to do is let's go ahead and let's draw a few circles. So I'm going to use the color gray. So you can see right here, I have this color of gray, and it's a little bit lighter than a mid-tone, but just some sort of a gray, a lighter gray. And we're just going to go ahead and draw right onto our white background some simple circles like this. And that actually might even be too dark. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. And I'm going to go ahead and lighten this gray to more of a light gray like that. So it's about a quarter of the way down from white. Let's go ahead and redraw that circle. Much better. And do one right over here. Can do one here, and do one right here. So we're just going to use these as guides. They don't have to look perfect or anything like that. And then let's go ahead and let's switch over to the color black. And let's add a new layer on top of this to draw our actual textures. So when you're drawing textures, a huge part of it is going to be the profile of your form. So for example, if we're drawing some fur, a huge part that's going to make it look like fur is that profile contouring line. So you can see here, if I do some lines kind of like this, just some lines coming straight off and kind of zigzagging back and forth, it starts to create sort of a fur texture. You'll also notice that I'm having it all grow in a downwards direction. And just by drawing the outside profile lines, it already starts to look like fur. We can go in there and add even more texture by doing some of this on the inside. Now, because we're going to make this a sphere, we want to make sure that the fur texture is kind of curving around like this. And as it comes up here, it'll curve more like that down on the bottom. So we want to make sure that we're kind of following the curve of that sphere with our texture. And we want to also break it up and put it on different levels. So we don't just want to do a fur line coming across like that. We want to make sure that we break it up into separate levels. And actually, we're going to make this more of a downward view of the ball. So instead of having curved fur texture like that, it's all going to curve like this, all the way down the ball. All right, great. So there's some fur texture. Next, let's go ahead and let's try something else. Let's say we want to do something like stone with big cracks in it. Well, again, the profile is going to tell us a lot about that texture. So if we go ahead and start just by drawing some simple sort of crack shapes like this, almost looks like lightning. Some of them can be straight and jagged, and other ones can kind of be more wiggly. And we'll do another one right over here. So at this point, we don't know that much about this texture on the sphere. We don't know if these are actual cracks or if it's just the color of the stone or anything like that. So what we can do is by changing the profile. So if we go ahead and we make the point right there where it meets the edge of the sphere, kind of like a chasm like that. And we can bring that all the way around here and do the same thing there. Well, now it actually looks like there's some dimension to those cracks. Like that. All right, let's have a look at another example. Let's try something like scales. Let's say scales on a dragon. So you could just draw scales just kind of like this and just have them all overlapping. But if you really pay attention to the profile of your actual form, it's going to look a lot more real and have a lot more texture to it. So what I mean by this is if we're looking at scales from the side, they're probably going to kind of stick off the edge like that. And as they come around this form, we'll see more of their front-facing shape. And as it gets back to the other side, we kind of get a profile of that scale, and you can see that it's kind of poking and sticking off the edge of this form. So if we go down to the next level, or if we draw the level above it, we can have it poke off like that, and basically just copy the same thing we just drew. And continue doing this. All right, great. Now let's go ahead and have a look at one more example. So let's say that we just want to do some fine texture, some surface texture, and we don't want to actually have any real depth to our texture or the form of the texture. So this would consist of things like little lines or little dots. So this might be something like freckles, imperfections in skin, or just texture on something like a rock. We can also do things like little circles like this to create texture. Maybe these are like little warts or bumps or something like that. Maybe little half circles. And even though this is really fine texture, we can go ahead and further the texture a little bit by adding a little bit of texture to the profile. So let's say, for example, some of these circles are bumps, and so we can kind of add a tiny little bump to that outside edge of the circle. Let's add another one. All right, great. So there we go. We just created 4 different spheres with different contouring line textures. So just remember that one of the most important things when you're drawing texture without highlights and shadows is that profile of your form. That's going to tell you a lot about what the texture is on that form. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lecture.